From the great state of Wisconsin, it's Senator Ron Johnson. Senator, good morning to you.
Good morning, guys. How you doing?
We're doing very well. Thanks for taking time for us again this morning.
Happy to.
Looking forward to heading back to Washington, D.C. this week?
Generally not. No, I enjoyed my time here in Wisconsin, traveling all over, listening to what's on the concern of the citizens of Wisconsin.
Yeah, I saw a lot of pictures via your Twitter feed attending county fairs and all sorts of gatherings around the state. What have the people of Wisconsin been talking with you about over these past few weeks?
I can pretty well summarize it in one word: security. I think people are, in such uncertain times, they're hungering for leadership. They're hungry for leadership. They're willing to tell them the truth. And what they're finding, certainly after 6 years of President Obama, the national security has been reduced, their income security, their job security, health care security, retirement security, all those areas of their lives that they're looking for some sense of safety and security has been reduced, and they're not happy.
And one of the things that they're not happy about, and I keep hearing it from people all over the place, and I'm sure you hear it a whole lot more, is this Iran deal.
Yeah, they understand what a good deal is and what a good deal is not. And they generally understand, too, and I think that's one of the appeals of Donald Trump, that they look to Donald Trump, somebody who's been able to actually negotiate a good deal, and they look at President Obama and Secretary Kerry and go, these guys couldn't negotiate themselves their way out of a paper bag. And that's, what we're finding in this deal now is we will be pumping tens of billions, eventually hundreds of billions of dollars into the economy and military of the largest state-sponsored terrorism. There's absolutely no behavior modification required by Iran. All the UN Security Council resolutions that impose sanctions on Iran, we're only going to lift those sanctions if Iran agreed to dismantle their uranium enrichment program. Of course, President Obama, at the start of the negotiation, basically acknowledged the right to continue to enrich uranium, which again puts them on the path, or leaves them on the path to becoming nuclear power eventually. So it's just a bad deal all the way around, and there's just really no way to put the lipstick on that pig.
Senator Ron Johnson from the great state of Wisconsin with us. It's Ronnie and Scott on WROK. And Senator, this horrible picture we saw last week, it's just a little idea of what's happening in Syria, and as refugees try to move out of that area to safer ground, but this little boy washing up on the shore, and people are rightfully outraged by it. This Iran deal gives Iran access to billions of dollars. What does Iran do with that money? Well, they prop up Assad in Syria. They send bombs, missiles, weapons to Syria. By allowing this deal to go through, by allowing Iran's oil to hit the open market, by allowing them access to billions of dollars, we're propping up Assad, and we're guaranteeing more horrors in Syria.
We really are, and let's face it, that is a tragedy, but it's even a greater tragedy in some respects is the fact that this has been going on now for years. There have been millions of Syrians displaced within their own country, millions of refugees have already spilled into Turkey and Jordan and other the surrounding Gulf states, destabilizing that region. Of course, that is what Iran does. Mm-hmm. They destabilize the region, and what we're also finding now, certainly Europe is finding, and now there's going to be pressure on the U.S. to accept refugees as well, but the problems in the Middle East do not stay in the Middle East. They start spilling over, and we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg here in terms of the refugees that have escaped Syria. Now it's starting to come onto shore into Europe, and of course, once they're in Europe, they have greater access, potentially to cause problems if there are terrorists among those refugees. Right. So this is a national security issue, and guys, it did not have to spin out of control this way had America provided the type of leadership, had President Obama not bugged out of Iran. We should have left a stabilizing force behind to stabilize that fragile coalition. That would have been a historic opportunity. That was a historic opportunity blown by this administration. Now you're seeing events spin out of control.
And, the much vaunted red line that we discussed before that the president had said, had that red line been honored, we might not be looking at some of the problems we're looking at now either.
Well, again, I primarily go back to the fact that we did not leave a stabilizing force behind in Iraq. We had won the Iraq War, lost it, won it again, and now President Obama lost it again. And that stabilizing force, had we left it there to, again, stabilize that fragile coalition, would have been there not only to stabilize Iraq, but could have helped stabilize the entire Middle East. You would not have allowed Iran to do those overflights over Iraq to supply Assad and help to stabilize that situation in Syria. So all of these things are connected, and the world has really been, and this administration has really been ignoring these situations. Now you're, like I say, starting to see this spill over, and you see these tragedies of that little 3-year-old.
Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin with us, Riley and Scott on WROK. Before we leave the topic of Iran, it appears the president now has enough support in the U.S. Senate to uphold a potential veto if the Senate votes to disapprove the Iran deal. Is there still a question, Senator, as to whether or not that disapproval vote will come forward? Will there be enough Democrats to join Republicans to at least get a vote on this?
Yeah, we're not even sure whether the Democrats will be able to filibuster it and not even get a vote on disapproval. But again, it's really important to point out that this is not approving a treaty. This isn't advice and consent of the Senate the way it should be. Something of this consequence, an agreement that is so important, really should have been dealt with as a treaty, which would require 2/3 approval in the Senate. But President Obama said, no, it's just an executive agreement. I can do this on my own. And the only reason the American people are involved through the elected representatives is the bill we passed in the Senate. But it's pretty weak tea, and it's set up this very convoluted process of vote of disapproval. Don't even know that we'll get that vote. Don't know whether that'll get landed on the president's desk. If it does, he said he'll veto it. And he already has 34 Democrat senators that will sustain a veto. So the Iran deal is going to move forward.
Senator Ron Johnson, another big topic in the Senate and House this month will be trying to get a budget done before the end of September. The president just last week said he will veto any budget that limits spending. Unless he gets his spending increases, he'll veto any budget and then try to place the blame on you for shutting down the government again, I suppose. How do you see this playing out?
Well, just to be clear, we already passed the budget, but we haven't passed his appropriation bills based on that budget. That's because Democrats have been blocking. For example, we passed the Defense Authorization Act, but the Democrats blocked the appropriation bill that would have been attached to that authorization. So they're the ones playing shutdown politics right now. And people got to scratch your head. President Obama is the commander-in-chief. We see events spinning out of control in the world, and yet he continues to allow the military to be hollowed out, really putting national security at risk for his desire to increase domestic spending, which is also out of control. So, I mean, I just don't get it. I hope the American people show the proper outrage and hold the president and Democrats in the Senate responsible for creating this kind of gridlock and hollowing out our military.
And it certainly seems, by all the estimates that we looked at, especially when you look at naval strength, taking us back to some of the levels that we had post-World War I.
Yeah, and when we're hearing, certainly Army generals saying that, we barely have the capability now to fight a one-front war, much less a two-front war. And no, our military is being hollowed out. We've done this before, and we've always paid the price. And I think the world is paying a price right now for the fecklessness, the weakness, the lack of resolve of this administration. President Obama has had a strategy. It's called peace through withdrawal, and it has been a miserable failure. You actually achieve peace through strength. And, I believe America's been a phenomenal force for good in the world. Not a perfect, certainly not perfect, but we really have the best interests of the world at heart. And when we don't lead, we're seeing these leadership vacuums, these voids created, and some very bad people, some very bad things fill that void, and that's what we're witnessing today.
U.S. Senator Ron Johnson with us from the state of Wisconsin. It's Riley and Scott on WROK. Senator, the debt ceiling, once again, will be part of our vernacular in the very near future. I think end of October or so is when we begin bumping up against that again. Do you foresee another conflict over raising the debt ceiling in the near future?
Well, certainly what we need to get is some fiscal controls out of any increase in the debt ceiling. One thing that is enormously frustrating for me, I ran because we're mortgaging our children's future. I'm the guy that's been talking about this 30-year deficit, putting some numbers to it. And by the way, sit down if you're not sitting. The Congressional Budget Office projects over the next 30 years our accumulated deficits will total $103 trillion. It's about $10 trillion the first decade, $28 trillion the second, $68 trillion the third decade, and let's face it, this president is doing nothing to address that. And so we literally are watching, we're just sitting back, we're not doing anything about the fact that we are literally mortgaging our children's future, and we're just not willing to put in the controls. And so I certainly hope we put some controls like Full Faith and Credit Act or the End Government Shutdown Act, to any increase in the debt ceiling, but it'll be increased because we have not got our spending under control, and we're still running these enormous deficits, and they're going to just continue to increase until we get serious about fixing things like saving programs like Social Security and Medicare for future generations.
That, and you're dealing with a guy who constantly is wheeling out the word veto whenever these sorts of discussions come around, too.
Well, I think I've told you my story when I was in the White House and trying to get President Obama to agree to some deficit reduction. And I showed him that 30-year deficit number, $103 trillion, and he said, "Ron, we can't show the American public numbers that big. If we do, they'll get scared. They give up hope and sense. Besides, Ron, we can't do all the work. We have to leave somewhere for future presidents, future Congresses." So when you have a president of the United States, and let's face it, in our current form of government, presidential power is growing. If we're going to accomplish big things, we need presidential leadership. This president hasn't led on this issue at all.
U.S. Senator Ron Johnson, before we let you go, and now we'd set up some sort of friendly wager about this Sunday's Bears-Packers game, but quite frankly, we have no confidence the Bears will put up a fight this week. So instead, how about we just ask you for a Packers preview? Is this still a Super Bowl caliber team without Jordy Nelson at the wide receiver spot? How good can the Packers be this year?
I think as long as Aaron Rodgers stays healthy, he's an amazing quarterback and just a really good person, too. So I think we've got a pretty good shot. Obviously, we hated to see lose Jordy for the season, but we got some other pretty good talent on that team, so I'm still hopeful.
Still going to be a headache for the Bears. I have that feeling. Senator, as always, we really appreciate your time. Have a terrific week.
Have a great day, guys.